I like to add one or two nativity scenes to my collection every year, and this design from Steve Good caught my attention. I'll leave a link to the free plans in the description, and I'll pass along a few tips as I make one. I decided to make the nativity front layer and the spacer layer from 3/4 inch thick red oak. As usual, I'll start with the interior cuts, and I'll work from left to right. The order of the cuts doesn't matter, I just like to work in a logical manner. I'm using a number 5 Pegas Modified Geometry blade because there are some very small cutouts and very tight turns in this pattern. This wood is relatively hard, so cutting will be slow. Years ago, my wife and I used to do one or two craft shows in late November and early December. We got to know some of the customers, and one woman purchased a different nativity set every year. Although we haven't done a craft show in years, I still make an effort to add one or more nativity sets to my inventory every year. The next cut is a small triangle shape at the bottom of the manger. I cut from the pilot hole in the center to each of the triangle's 3 points. Then I moved back to one of the corners and moved the workpiece until it was oriented to make the horizontal cut at the bottom. I did this by slowly turning a workpiece while the blade continued to run in the curve it had just created. Once the wood was facing in the direction I wanted to cut next, I put pressure on the workpiece again to cut the bottom of the triangle. When I reached the next corner, I used the same technique to change direction, and I did it again at the top of the triangle. The next space is a long rectangle, so it contains 90-degree turns. If you're new at scroll sawing, these may seem intimidating, but once you learn to cut them, you'll wonder why they look difficult. Here's how I handle 90-degree turns. I cut right to the point where I need to turn, then back off the blade pressure just slightly. With the blade still running but not cutting, I swivel the workpiece 90 degrees until it faces the direction I want to cut. Once the cut line is aligned with the blade, I resume cutting. Do this slowly when the procedure is new to you, and as you gain experience, you'll be able to make these cuts faster. It's like many other activities where eye-hand coordination and muscle memory improve with experience. There are 3 more interior cuts, but nothing new to warrant an explanation. While I was finishing these 3, I was thinking a bit about blade size choices. I've been scrolling for at least 30 years, so that equates to hundreds of hours of experience. My tendency is to use the largest blade possible, but that's not necessarily the best practice. The purpose of this channel is to teach others how to use the scroll saw, so I'm consciously trying to make blade size choices that would be best for my audience. I would likely have chosen a number 7 blade for these interior cuts, but that would be too large for a novice to make the tight turns. That ringing sound indicates I have proper tension on the blade, so I'm ready to begin cutting again. I decided to move up one size and inserted a number 7 Pegas Modified Geometry blade to make the exterior cut for the nativity scene and spacer. The number 7 will cut faster, and there aren't many tight turns to make on this exterior cut. Almost like it was on cue, I came to a very tight turn for the donkey's tail. When I reached the point where the line changed direction, I stopped, then backed the blade up a bit in the newly created curve. I used the curve, plus a tiny bit of the waist area, to turn the workpiece 180 degrees, and then I backed the blade, dull side first, to the spot where it quit cutting. Now it only required a small turn to align the blade with the next cutting direction. I cut to the end of the tail, and making the turn for that shape was just a matter of some quick hand movements on the workpiece. There was a series of cuts spaced very closely together that represented the donkey's mane. I didn't try to follow the cut line exactly here. I just made a cut that approximated the pattern. I think that if you just made a smooth cut here, the donkey would still look fine. A short time after that, I came to the cut for the donkey's ears. That entailed a sharp turn, and I made that by using the technique I used on the donkey's tail. There were a few more tight turns, and I made them by backing out and turning around as well. I made the donkey on the right side the same way as the one on the left. The only difference is that the second donkey is a mirror image of the one on the left. The second oak piece is a spacer between the nativity scene in front and the word joy at the rear. This is a rectangular piece with rounded corners on the left and right top corners. The back of the display that says joy might look deceptively difficult to cut, but it isn't. I'm making this from 4/4 poplar because I'll be painting it, and poplar takes paint nicely. I switched back to a number 5 Pegas Modified Geometry blade because poplar is much softer than oak, and this piece has many curves and tight angles to cut. I cut from the pilot hole to one of the many curved areas in this first cutout. The next turn is for a very small angle, and I'll show you an easy way to make this. Rather than try to swivel the workpiece into position for the next cut, I kept going past the turning point, keeping the blade in the waist area. Then I rotated the workpiece 180 degrees and returned to the intersection from a different perspective. This turn set things up so I could come almost straight to this point where I wanted to start again. If you look at this design for a short time, you'll see many repetitive shapes. By the time you complete all the interior cuts on the word joy, you should have measurably improved your scroll saw cutting skills. I briefly considered drilling the center of the O with a Forstner bit, but changed my mind. First, I might not have the right size bit. Second, by the time I find the bit, chuck it into the drill press, drill the hole, and then return the bit to the storage box, I could easily have cut the hole faster on the scroll saw. As it is, it's taking me as long to describe as it is to do. The top and bottom, as well as the two sides of the letter O, have mirror image designs. The side designs are similar to what was on the J, so I've had enough practice with those moves that they should be easy. There's not much to the little designs above and below the O cutout. If you can handle the complex curves that were in the J, these will be entry-level by comparison. After completing those two cutouts, the side shape seemed somewhat like déjà vu. There's nothing more to explain here. With the interior cuts completed, all I have left is the long exterior cut for the word joy. There's nothing complicated about this cut. It just takes a little time and patience. Go slowly and let the blade do the work. Most of this cut is either straight lines or gentle curves, but at the top of the J and the Y, we have some 90-degree corners. When I reach a point where two lines meet at a 90-degree angle, I don't just keep moving to make the turn. That would result in a curve rather than a sharp point. Instead, I stop pushing the wood into the blade, and I use the saw blade curve just created, plus some of the waist area, to swivel the workpiece to the next direction in which I want to cut. Once that move is complete, I resume applying pressure to the workpiece to cut along the following line. When done correctly, this results in a sharp corner. I used a warm satin spray polyurethane to finish the Nativity, a gloss red spray paint for the word joy, and then I glued the two sections together. This resulted in one of the most unusual Nativity sets in my collection. This project should be slightly challenging for a novice, but routine for anyone with much scroll saw experience. As always, I enjoy reading your comments, and I will reply to each of them. Until the next project, 2 suggestions for what to watch next are on the screen.